Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our first series of webinar on business process management. I'm Amit Chauhan, host for this webinar. I'm a principal managing partner and founder director of Q3H. Q3H is a business process management consulting firm with more than a decade in the industry. Before we start, a very quick background about why this webinar or series of webinars has been planned. Almost a month before the lockdown, I was in a discussion with a senior leadership team in Bangalore, which is into e-commerce. So one of the senior executive was sharing with us that they started a business process management journey almost like 9 months before, and they are almost at the verge of completing it. And in order to share the progress that they have made, they shared one document, which is a hard copy document which they shared as a copy with me, having a cover note which titled as Business Process Management Order to Cash. This document had 389 pages. And that's what they call it as a business process management. We experienced, as a management consulting firm, we have experienced these kind of the questions, definitions many times about business process management. Different definitions, different ways of explanation of BPM, different understanding of BPM by different professionals. So we thought about why not we organize this webinar and discuss about what is business process management, get a clarity about business process management, what to expect from a BPM. And based on this, the series of webinar has been planned. In this series of webinar, we are inviting the industry experts who have implemented business process management in their career, and they can also share about their experiences, their business cases with us. So I would say we are in the journey of business process management. This is season 1. And our objective is to move from confusion to clarity. And in order to achieve our objective of from moving from confusion to clarity, we have 4 episodes of this series. The first episode of this series is Demystifying Business Process Management, which is today. And the other 3 episodes are going to be organized in the next weeks. And in the last slide, we will discuss about the schedule as well. So this is a journey that we are starting. And I hope you all enjoy, you all learn, and at the end of the webinar series, we all get the common understanding about business process management. To start with, all those questions which are very common and we heard about business process management, we collated together. In this webinar, we are going to discuss about these questions, which are largely categorized into 3 categories. What is BPM? Why BPM is important? And how a BPM can be implemented, or what even to expect from a business process management journey. So in our very first series, very first episode of our web series on business process management, we have invited Mr. Prashant Hoskote. Mr. Hoskote has 30 years of experience into quality and service excellence, customer experience, and innovation management. Prashant, as he likes to call, has chaired as well as been on the board of national and international professional bodies such as National Board for Quality Promotion at the Quality Council of India, Vice Chairman ASQ Quality Management Division, Global Asia and Australia, to mention a few. Prashant has been recognized as 50 most talented quality professional at World Quality and featured as one of the front runner in executive focus columns of Business India. Welcome, Prashant. I'm so glad to have you on the board for our very first webinar on business process management. So I hope, Prashant, you are mute. Hey, Prashant, you are mute.
Okay, thank you very much, and I feel honored to be invited as one of the first guests by Q3H. My pleasure to be here. Thanks, Amit.
Pleasure, Prashant. So as I shared, to start with our business process management journey, the very first common question that comes across to us many times, and I think this is the first question which is right to start with. What do you think is a business process management? How do you define business process management?
Well, yeah, first of all, thank you, all of you. I understand there are about 100 plus people who have logged in and are listening to this. This is quite a number. I'm so glad that even though you all are at your respective homes, you know how life has changed, hasn't it? We are at home and still at work, and the different way of how world is going to be in the going forward, I guess. But thank you for your time, and to Q3 Edge as well. Good to ask this basic question, Amit. So thanks for asking this. Always start, as they say, start with the basics. So what is business process management? You know, typically in any organization, however small, medium, or large the enterprise is, it's made up of a set of relatively complex and complicated processes, whether you like it or not. You know, sometimes I like to say that, you know, I've actually told CEOs to say, what if you had a drone, or if you're on a satellite and you were watching your organization from up there? What would you probably see? What do you expect to see? And you probably expect to see a set of intertwined processes, almost like a entangled ball of wool. And that's how it is. I mean, it's not that it was designed that way, but as companies grow, it just happens that way, and it gets more and more complicated and complex, both. Now, in a situation like that, if one were to live life like that, it would lead to chaos. It would lead to all kinds of results going the wrong way. Costs would go up, revenues would go down, employees would get quite dissatisfied, to say the least, with the confusion in the organization. And of course, our Mr. Customer would say, what's happening? Why am I having no satisfaction working with this company? What does therefore business process management do? It tells you that if you have something called a corporate vision, you need to be able to say, how do I action this vision? And this is another thing I've always noticed. Corporate visions remain on the walls of companies, nicely framed up for everyone to see, but nothing happens with it. What do you do with that vision? What you need to do with the vision is senior leaders need to sit and say, how do I action this vision? What do I do? What are the strategies that I need to build to make the vision happen? And from the strategies, think logically, okay? Vision, strategies. From the strategies, if those strategies have to actually get delivered, what strategic objectives do I need to, drive? And each of those strategic objectives, for them to happen and the results to come, what key business processes do I need to have for the strategy objectives to get implemented and results to come? Now, when you talk of processes, key business processes, these processes would have different levels of processes, within that, level 1, level 2, level 3, and so on. We'll come to that later, but there are processes. Now, is that enough? Well, not really. How do you know the processes are actually performing what they're supposed to perform? You need metrics for each of those processes to ensure that the measures are identified. They are actually, business intelligence and data comes out of that. A metrics system is developed out of it. Once that is done is when you start to know if the processes are actually delivering what they're supposed to deliver. And then say, okay, if they're not delivering what they're supposed to deliver, you either re-engineer the process, or if there is a lot of replication or a lot of chaos in the process, I'd rather automate the process. So in terms of, and once the KPIs are delivered, the objectives need to get changed, targets need to change. So to me, this entire exercise, vision downwards, right up to identifying the metrics, dashboards coming out of the metric system, the dashboards telling us whether we are going the right direction or no, and therefore improving the process continuously, is a end-to-end BPM exercise. I don't see many organizations do this, and we'll probably talk about that later. But the point is that this is really BPM in my view.
Perfect, Prashant. So the business process management, is actually an approach, a methodology which integrates the entire organization towards the common organization objective.
Mm-hmm.
A vision of an organization, it can be as bigger as the vision of the organization, or it can be a specific objective of an organization. For example, go to market. And then, as I understood, you're saying that all the strategies, business objectives that you're defining are aligned towards it. So,
They
business
have to
process
be. Mm-hmm.
management is all about managing your business through processes.
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Hey, thank you so much. Prashant, we heard a lot of different standards, process frameworks, quality, things which also talks about the organization visions, processes, different frameworks, different categories in which the process can be categorized. So that leads me to the next question, because in India, we have seen a lot of organizations are either moving towards business excellence journey, or they have already started their business excellence journey. And since you have been implemented business excellence journey in many organizations, where did you see the role of business process management? How did you find BPM helping
Mm-hmm.
all these organizations implementing their business excellence journey?
Excellent question again, Amit. I think it's always a bit of a confusion in the minds of people to say, what is this BPM thing? I've also heard CEOs say, no, this year we will do business excellence. I think next year we will start doing BPM.
Yeah, true.
Clearly, that is something very, very wrong in the way they are looking at both. That very clearly tells me that they don't understand either. I'm sorry, I'm being provocative, but that's the reality. Business excellence, as those of you would know, whichever criteria it is, whichever framework it is to me almost like a religion, Hinduism, Christianity, or whatever, Islamism. You got to adopt that religion. Once adopted, that's the way you live, and and for you to be able to deliver on the various criteria of the framework, um, as those of you know criteria and those of you know frameworks would know that there are process categories and there's a result category. The very fact that they are called process categories, the first six in the Baldrige framework are called process categories, means it's all about processes. Leadership, strategy, customers, all of them have various processes. Once you deliver on those processes, the seventh category is called results or business results, depending on which framework we're talking about. Now, the very fact that you have so many processes that you need to drive and you need to measure and you need to get integrated results on it, you need a methodology to put some kind of method in the madness, if I may call it that, right? Some kind of a structured method, a methodology to make sure all those intertwined processes are actually not just intertwined, but they're integrated, quote unquote integrated, which means the outcome of one process is an input into another process. You can clearly see that happening, and therefore you're getting results, and not just by chance that you're getting results. There is a real method. Now, you can't have integrated processes drawn out really well. When I say drawn out, I don't mean literally flowchart. I mean in a it's sketched really well. You can't deliver those results. BPM as a methodology or as a tool is where this fits in. BPM allows you to make sure that the processes are all, integrated. They're all intertwined with one another, and there are measures coming out of it. Those measures are delivering the results, and the results are telling you whether you're going right or wrong. If wrong, then you need to continuously improve them, and all the things that I mentioned earlier. But BPM is very, very essential in any business excellence journey. Let's put it this way. Those of you again who know a little bit of business excellence and the scoring system, you probably will never score more than 350 to 400 in a 1000 point scale if you do not have a structured BPM process within the BPM initiative within the organization. And by the way, not all organizations might call it BPM. They may call it by different names, as they say, what's in a name? But the idea is you need to have something that makes sure that the processes are aligned to the objectives, they come out of the objectives, and all the good things that I mentioned earlier. If that structure is not seen, it is really not BPM. But that's required for business excellence to happen. If you want to achieve excellence, the word excellence in your organization, you need BPM to happen to make sure that excellence is achieved.
Perfect. Prashant,
right?
so this
Mhm.
the core point of a BPM with business excellence is about the integration of the entire system. While you talked about Malcolm Baldrige, it also gave me a thought about recently we were discussing about 7S of McKinsey model. The 7S of McKinsey model also talks about how to integrate all the 7S together, and then that's the only way that you can achieve your business objective.
Mhm.
At the end, in the BPM is all about integrating processes, systems all together, as you have shared. So
Mhm.
we talk a lot about processes. Prashant, this leads me to the next question. We have seen organization use of different methods of documenting their processes. So and then they have different level of information maintained in the process. Some of them have called it as an SOP or process manuals, or even process models. Unfortunately, somewhere we have even seen that organization called BPM as a business process modeling, and it
Mhm.
is not business process management.
Mhm.
So, what do you recommend if an organization is going for a process management journey? Whether it is an SOP or a process manual or a process modeling, anywhere did you see more valuable, more advantage over one over the another?
Actually, I won't call it advantage or disadvantage. They're all required. They are all required at different stages of the BPM journey. I put it this way. Unfortunately, today, CEOs are getting so impatient. It's like the other day I was talking to another CEO and I said, when was the last time you saw a one-day international? He said, I don't know, a cricket one-day international. When was the last time you saw a T20 match in cricket? Said, I don't know. I don't think I have the time to, watch the entire thing. What do you actually watch? Highlights. What do you watch in a news broadcast? Just the headlines. That gives me enough dope to get into a social
True.
conversation that
Yeah.
evening. Now, in such an environment where people are so impatient, most organizations, especially the newer ones, jump into straightaway standard operating procedures. Unfortunate, but that is the reality. They
Mhm.
start writing SOPs, not realizing that probably it is the SOP that is being written of a very bad process. Once and why do they do that? Because SOPs is something on the ground. They can get into action tomorrow. So they just say, listen, forget processes, write the SOP, send it to all the people who are working on that process and let them start the work, because I want work to happen. I want monies to come in, results to get delivered. My board is putting pressure on me, and so on and so forth. Is that the right approach? Not really. It's a knee jerk approach. You may just get results, but that's just by chance. The right approach is what I mentioned earlier. SOPs come at the fag end of that process, which is create a business process management architecture or a work system, as the Baldrige model would call it, right? Those of you who are familiar with the Baldrige model would know this name, work system. Um, that work system has to be aligned with the strategy. BPM architecture has to be aligned with the strategy. The architecture gives rise to processes, different levels of processes, level one, level two, level three, sometimes in large organizations, even level four. Each of those processes will have metrics. And that's the stage where you need to actually have SOPs, process manuals, and so on and so forth. And in fact, you can go even one step further. SOP can be broken down further into, those of you who are familiar with ISO 9001 would say, work instructions. Work instructions give rise to records and documents and what have you, if you really write them well. Now, that's the stage where you start doing SOPs and what have you, not the other way around. It is very sad that companies in a hurry start writing SOPs first, forgetting all the other important stuff. And then when there's chaos created and the SOPs don't deliver, you stop and think, why would that be? And that's because you don't have a process management methodology in place. You know what I mean? So there has to be a order in which it is done. It's painstaking. It is enjoyable pain for people who do it, but it's pain that you can't do without. You've got to go through that process to have sustainable results. You want quick fix results? Enjoy, but that's not the way I think I would recommend it be done.
Perfect. Prashant, even the visual management of
Mm-hmm.
process, I believe, give more advantage to the organization. Like you said, now even the CEOs do not spend much time on watching a complete one-day international match. So, do you see any change in the process management side from visual management?
Oh yeah, absolutely. As they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? A process BPM exercise uh, um, allows you for visual management. The once you start mapping and modeling your processes, it's far better than words written in the standard operating
Hmm.
procedure, which people do not read. People hate reading. Why do you think the Japanese language is the way it is? If you notice, the Japanese language is almost like pictures, right?
Yes, true, very
Because
true.
they love it that way. They love it that way. They love pictures. Almost everything is pictures. Why do they teach the Ishikawa diagram to students in the second grade in Japan? Because that's how they want children to think, in pictures, right? So absolutely, visual management very key. In fact, it even helps in later on at some stage when you get down to automation. A graphic representation of the process would help to understand what exactly are how the process should work, so that the techies can come and take over from there onwards. It just makes their life that much more simpler.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Hmm.
And even the documents, it's a different interpretation made by every individual based on their experience and their knowledge. So
Sure,
the perception while reading can be different from one person to another.
absolutely.
So, Prashant, so far we discussed about a BPM from the process management side, but nevertheless, in the industry, if you have seen that, there are many automation platforms also available, and they also qualify it as a business process management. We have a BPM automation platform. I just recently came across with one of the automation product, which actually automate contact list into an emailers. And the name of the product is also a BPM product, right? So,
Mm.
what do you think? What is the role of an automation in this entire business process management journey? Where does this BPM supports?
Uh, Well, I very, very briefly touched upon it in the earlier response, but let me explain that a little better. So it's probably this is the time to explain it better. Uh, by the way, there are two words that keep getting thrown, digitization and automation, and they are used sometimes interchangeably. I don't think they should be used interchangeably. Digitizing processes is about using a certain platform, technology platform, to say, rather than struggling with the Excels of the world or the Visios of the world, um, and then not having them properly, either properly mapped or they're not very shareable. Is there a way you can use some kind of a technology platform to digitize a process, and it has its own advantages? Let's take an example. A few years ago, the insurance industry, for instance, had something like 300 odd changes in 1 year. So about, if you take just working days, there were 1.5 changes per day in regulatory changes per day, 1.5 change per day. So you can imagine an employee almost going, how do I, when I go to work today, how will the process change? And what do I need to do differently today to tomorrow? In a situation like that, if you use an Excel or a Visio to map a process in someone's laptop or computer and then expect that it be sent to everyone and they'll follow it tomorrow, it's just impossible. You need something like a digitization sort of a software, a technology platform that helps you to put it in a manner where it's very easily changeable. The changes that you make at one place in the process throw up the changes in all other places where this change impacts. Risks are identified, and the risks are also, then you can think of how to mitigate them. All can be done at one level. That's still not automation. When it comes to automation, once you've done all of the good work in the BPM exercise, which is mapping the process, modeling them, identifying the metrics, creating the dashboards, measuring the data using the dashboards, and so on and so forth, you would come to a stage where you say, hey, there are a lot of repetitious, monotonous activities in this process. Can I do with some macros and RPA? Can I do with just that? Maybe I can. Maybe 50% of them are quick kills, and I can do macros and so on. Not exactly very long term in their structure, in the way they exist, because a macro can crack anytime. but there are ways of doing more robust macro these days. So macros and RPA can be done, and you can fix some problems. But there may be some where the whole workflow needs to change, which is where you say, okay, this particular process is seems like ready and relevant for a full-scale automation. I repeat, ready and relevant in terms of readiness, in terms of relevance. Relevance from a strategy point of view, it is important enough for me to do that, and ready because we feel that it is something which, lots of the process is put in place. There are measures which are predictable measures, and the data is coming well from the process. So maybe that's a good time to now start automating. There are lots of manual activities, but instead of going into cut paste and sort of band-aids by putting in macros and RPAs, let me do a full-scale automation like any of these workflow management systems. But BPM comes in very handy when you decide, when you reach that point. It's, as I said earlier, it's a cake for the techies to take and run once the BPM exercise is completed. It's far more easier for them to automate the process. That's the place for it, I would think.
Perfect. Thank you. In fact, you rightly said, Prashant, we have also seen that there are two groups running in an organization. There is a group of process experts and there is a group of business analysts, right? They both work on the similar process, but with a different mindset. One group is more focused in terms of defining the processes that it is to be executed in the organization, whereas a business analyst team define the process as a requirement specification. Whereas as part of the BPM, it has a notations where your process definition should become your requirement specification, because what is going to get executed is no different than how it is executing or defining as a process. Prashant, in this entire journey of implementing business process management in various industries, what kind of challenges that you have faced? And let me ask my next question also, because these are linked. What are your learnings and best practices for these challenges?
Well, that's you asked one of my favorite questions, I think. What makes it difficult? What are the challenges? Okay, I think the first challenge is, for might sound cliche, but that's the reality. Top management to come together and derive what is called a BPM roadmap that should start with creating a BPM architecture that is very closely linked with the strategic objectives, which are linked with the strategies, and which are linked with the vision. I'm going to say that over and over again so that it remains in your mind. If there's one thing that stays in your mind, it should be this, that it has to start from there. It has to be linked with the vision, the strategies, the objectives, and therefore the BPM architecture. The BPM architecture is part of the BPM roadmap. So it's leadership's role to develop this BPM roadmap. In the absence of this, if you just say, you know what, I like this concept called BPM, let's take a process and start, working with it, because there is probably a desperate need. Customers are complaining about certain large process, and let's do some BPM on that process. In effect, you're saying you're just mapping the process to fix the problem. But that's not BPM. There's far more to BPM than just mapping a process, right? So BPM, a roadmap, hugely important. Secondly, as I said earlier, limiting BPM to become a huge, massive process mapping exercise across the organization. So I've almost come across companies where people get into groups, into teams. Each team is assigned a process, and they are told, you know what, there's something called this digitization tool of process mapping. So I'm giving you some tool which is better than Visio and better than Excel. Go map all the processes of your unit and come back to me within 2 weeks. Guess what? Everyone's running helter-skelter like rats on wheels, and they're all mapping processes, not necessarily knowing why they're even mapping them. It becomes a huge exercise. At the end of the 2 months of mapping processes all over the company, you start wondering, what did I actually get out of this? That has been a big challenge, as I see. There is really no point having people to map processes if you don't know which processes you're mapping. Are they really important to me? what has told you that is important to me? Where has it come from? And so on. So that to me is another big challenge or difficulty in making it happen successfully. The third, of course, is the review and the governance mechanism. I think there needs to be a very strict governance mechanism and a review mechanism of this whole exercise. Like any other large, initiative, shall I say, this has to get the attention and the time and the effort by top management. Again, may sound cliche, but that is the truth. And last but surely not the least, my IT friends may not like it, but it should not, I'm saying, should not focus on automation before process management. You can't say, I want to do automation, uh, and then someone says, okay, what do you want to automate? It should be the other way around. Let the process decide what you want to automate, and not automation decide which process to take. It should be the other way around. Let the process and its readiness and the relevance decide whether it's ready for automation, is relevant for automation, not the other way around. It might be someone's great idea because IT head has, or the CEO himself might have attended a fantastic conference on automation. He comes and says, I think automation is the answer to all our problems. Let's automate them. It doesn't work that way. You got to figure out, why do you need automation? Where do you need it? And how much will it benefit by doing the automation? Is there an ROI to the automation? And so on. BPM is a preceding activity to the automation, not the other way around.
Perfect. So
These are, to me, the four top challenges, shall I say. Your other question was about learnings, is it?
yes, what are the best practices, learnings that you have learned?
Well, I'd say partly the BPM architecture is has to be the first step. Like I mentioned, that to me is a big learning. You cannot, I can't understate that or overstate it, because it's something which is so fundamental to any BPM exercise. Um, and if that is not done, really, we are going. It's just being done for the heck of it. Uh, the second, according to me, is about. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Um, Selecting and reviewing the really high impact business processes, and not going helter skelter, going all kinds of processes which are not relevant. And the third would be, depending on the size of the organization, you may want to have some kind of a technology platform to do the process mapping and modeling. There are various organizations that deliver on those technology platforms. I don't mean automation platforms. I don't mean that. I mean, uh, one can go one can go beyond the Excel and the Visios to use some technology platform to help map the processes, because it's far more shareable, far more flexible. When changes happen in the process, everyone seems to know the change almost at that very moment it's lodged into the system, and far more benefits. So I think it is important that these three learnings that at least I have come across are captured by organizations. Hopefully, learn from a little bit from this.
All right. Uh, Good, Prashant. I think we have discussed a lot about the process management automation, and since the industry is now moving towards more into artificial intelligence, robotic process automation, machine learning. So my next question is for these terminologies. Do you think BPM can give value add, can provide an importance while an organization is learning for AI, ML, or RPA journey?
Mm-hmm. Oh, sure. In a similar way as process to me is so fundamental in any exercise. I can't understand how an organization can even last without process management. Let's start with that first of all. Okay. Um, I'm reminded of one of the quality gurus, the great quality gurus, Dr. Juran, who said, "Look after the process, and the product will look after itself." I repeat, look after the process, and the product will look after itself. It's
Yes.
so profound statement that applies even to your real life, in your daily life. Look after the way you cook the chicken biryani, and the chicken biryani will come out well. Look after the process of studying, and your results will come well. Look after the process of practicing your cricket, and you'll be a top class player. I was surprised a few years ago when Ricky Ponting, the then captain of Australia, when they were consistently winning all tournaments, was asked at a post-match interview, "How are you so consistent?" I was dumbfounded when he said, "Well, we look after our processes really well. We look after the process of fielding, batting, bowling. Our strategies are very clearly written down, and the processes arriving out of that are very clearly managed well." And I said, "Wow, clearly this guy has attended a BPM class." Yeah. But the point I'm making is processes are so fundamental to any organization. Once these processes are all well written and done and managed, it comes out very clearly where would be the benefits of AI, ML, RPA. It throws up because, as I said earlier, a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? So it is important that these tools are used after a BPM exercise throws the opportunities, not the other way around. Okay, so uh, it's um, as the slide there says, prioritize the business process for automation and confirm the relevance and completeness. I can think of a couple of examples. In one of the insurance companies, about 120 bots were apparently uh, implemented in less than 12 months, because processes that were identified, they were integrated, and they all qualified for RPA, so that they achieved highest ROI. But where did they identify these opportunities, 120 opportunities from? Because they had done a very systematic BPM exercise. In another hospitality company, how did they use and why did they use AI and ML? They used it because they found through their data analysis uh, that that was thrown out of a BPM exercise, that there is a certain kind of customer that comes to a certain kind of a hotel and likes a certain kind of food of a certain age group. So if the age group was anywhere between 25 to 35, they typically seem to order a certain kind of food only, and therefore I can keep more of that food pre-prepared in the kitchen, so that the turnaround time of room service, turnaround time and meal experience in a restaurant can be reduced. So how did that happen? Because AI and ML helped them to make that happen. So clearly, business process management throws up opportunities for automation, for AI, ML, and RPA, and that's where I would see BPM playing a huge role. It helps you to even measure the effectiveness of AI, ML automation. Therefore,
Perfect. Prashant, I have seen the organizations who are at the journey of the business process management implementing, and I have seen them. It gives me an idea from 120 bots that you have mentioned. These
mm-hmm.
organizations, when they integrated all their business processes, they identified which particular business process is really good for a quick automation rather than going for a full-fledged automation like SAP integration or something.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I've seen that in the journey of BPM, it helps an organization to explore all those business processes which are hidden somewhere,
Yeah.
which were there in the mind of the people who are executing it. But the moment it is started integrating and linking it with a business objective, they immediately started identifying why we are still doing this as a manual task. Is there any way we can automate it, or we have reached to an optimum level where whatever we are getting today can be achieved maximum with the manual? Now in order to move to the next level, we need to have the automation in place, or we
Mm-hmm.
need some smartness, some more insight about the process. So I
Mm.
see a lot of business cases are now coming up as an outcome of implementing business process management journey. Prashant, you
Yeah.
also have a very good experience about the innovation, right? And I
Yeah.
can see that
Mm-hmm.
now, uh, because of the current environment, right? It will not remain the same way of working what we used to do a month before, right? Every organization has now started thinking about how do we do better, faster, in a different way than, in order to take care of the current environment with the available
Yeah.
resources.
Mm-hmm.
I feel innovation plays a very important role now onwards also. So organization who's having a BPM, how their journey will for the innovation will help them, will be much faster or a better. Do you see any relationship in between the BPM with the innovation management?
Interesting question, and a very topical one, because topical because I believe you can see how a stupid virus has changed our lives, isn't it? I don't mean stupid in the sense of it's a very dangerous virus, but it's stupid because how little thing has changed our entire lives, and suddenly the subject of innovation has taken so much more importance than it had. It's no more a choice; it is a necessity in organizations. Look at the way we are having meetings these days. TCS the other day announced, I'm sure many of you have heard this, TCS announced that 75% of the jobs will be working from home over the
True.
next few years. Um, I have not heard ever before Google and Apple working together on an app to identify if there are any COVID-19 patients around you that you can, sort of embed onto your phone. Two companies which wouldn't look eye to eye are actually working together. So innovation management is suddenly become a huge deal. I mean, I call it innovation management. If you notice, I don't call it innovation because it's truly innovation management. I mean, let's face it. Cross a heart and tell me. The moment you use the word innovation, the first thing that comes to mind is product innovation. Innovation is almost synonymous to product innovation. But innovation management is much more than just product innovation. It's process innovation, service innovation, and so on and so forth. So it's a whole new subject. Going back to an excellence framework for a moment, innovation as a word in the frameworks, various frameworks, whether it is whether it is um, you know it is the EFQM framework or the Baldrige framework, hardly appeared in the criteria as a requirement. Now, innovation management is a very key requirement of the Baldrige framework, and comes in very relevantly. So it's clearly required across. Uh, Now, where will it come? Why will it useful? Why is it useful? Or is BPM useful in innovation? Vice versa? It's a chicken and egg story, if you ask me. It doesn't really matter what comes first. But in my assessment, even for innovation, which by the way, there's a misconception about innovation to say it seems like someone's coming up with a brainwave, an out of the box idea, and making it happen. Some will happen along the way, some will die along the way, but that's okay. That's really not innovation. It is one kind of innovation, which is a complete brainwave, which happens once in a million times. But innovation management too has a certain methodology. Now you're tying me to a process even in innovation, but innovation management is a methodology. You need to have some kind of a step-by-step way of doing innovations as well. Now, the moment you say innovation management has a methodology, that itself is a process. Number one. So you need process there too. Number one. Number two, once you take up an innovation project, one of the first things I believe you should do is to say, whether it is small innovation or large innovations, I'd like to understand how the process works today. What's the current process? What can I get information from the current process? Before I even start thinking of saying, okay, I think I should just throw this process out of the window and completely come up with a new one, it's design thinking or what have you. So it is important that you have the process in front of you even before you start innovating. There's another counter viewpoint to it to say, you know what, if there's a process in front of you, it may curb your creativity. I don't think so. It just gives you information that tells you what is working, what's not working, based on which you can then decide whether it's workable or not. So that to me is how I look at it. BPM and innovation play a very close role with one another. One is a good input to the other, and therefore both have to go hand in hand.
Perfect. Prashant, considering the time now, um, okay. we discussed about business process management, its fitment for process management journey, automation and digitization and innovation management today. With all your experience, we discussed in detail about this. We are almost reaching to the end of the session and the time. And I see there are a few questions which have been posted, which I would like to ask now on behalf of them. But because of the time constraint, and I can see that many questions are coming up, all questions are welcome. Perhaps due to the time restrictions, we may not pick up each and every question. But this is a promise that you will hear from us with each and every question. The question that you are asking from Prashant, from us, and you will get all the information through email also. But I'll definitely take some of the questions. Okay, Prashant, first question as it is asked, is it possible, okay, can we follow the bottom-up approach while taking BPM initiative because of time crunch by most of CEO? Because mostly you discuss about top to bottom approach.
I'm not sure. You can, if there is a desperate business requirement or a business need. Okay. What I mean by that is, if there's a fire situation, and you need to understand, you need to get some quick results. You need to understand what can be done differently. Where is this fire being created, and so on. You may want to do it, but I wouldn't call it a full-fledged BPM exercise. It is understanding the process, finding where in the process the issues are, and fixing that process. It's almost like a improvement project. Okay. A BPM exercise should start from the top. I mean, I can give you an example. Ideally, and this happened to one of my companies where I worked earlier. Ideally, a CEO should be able to, at the end of a BPM exercise, a CEO should be able to sit in his office and see the big dials of the company moving right or wrong. Are they going the right direction or the wrong direction? And if one of the dials of the 4 or 5 dials that he has in front of him are going into the red, if he clicks on one of that, he should be able to say what's the next level measures that are taking it to the red, and the next level, and the next level. If you keep drilling down that way and go to the metric which is at a sub process level, which is causing the big dial to become into the red, if you achieve that stage, that to me is BPM, and that cannot be achieved unless you do it top down. It can't happen if you do it bottom up. You can get results, but it will be short-term, quick fix results. If you want sustainable, high-level, strategic results, you need to do it top down with this kind of a goal in mind. Imagine your CEO sitting in his office with those dials. He'll love you for it. He'll actually love you for it, because he'll say, this is exactly what I wanted. I didn't want to get out of my office, but I wanted to know my Chennai office, so-and-so branch is really causing the process. This particular process in that branch is causing the process, the problem. Okay. Now that if you want to achieve, cannot be achieved unless you do it top down. I hope that answers your question.
Hey, thank you, Prashant. I'm so glad to see Roger Trigger. Roger is the global gurus of gurus on business process management. Is also is also participating in this conference.
Oh wow! I didn't know that. That's
amazing. And Roger, our next episode of the series going to be organized with Roger. Thank you so much, Roger, for participating in this conference. We would love to hear you about your experience from you about business process management. Roger, can we hear something from you about business process management as a connection for our next episode? What do we expect in enabling process management, business process management?
Yep. Hello, Emmett and Prashant and everyone else listening. Great to be with you all the way from down here in Australia. So So I think, I mean, I agree with everything that Prashant has just been saying, and I summarize it this way. I think the M in BPM stands for management. And I think that's everyone's starting point, or it should be. No organization in India or anywhere else in the world has a problem, a business problem, called we don't have enough process models. That's just not a known business problem. Maybe a tool to help us, but we have to start with the whole management thing. So how do we enable BPM? Or you will hear me say a lot, use the phrase process-based management. I mean the same thing, but oftentimes people have a different understanding of BPM. Some people think BPM is a piece of software. Obviously, we think it's a management philosophy, and that's what we mean. And process-based management says what we mean. But I use the terms interchangeably. So how do we enable that? How do we make it work? How do we build this system? As Prashant says, we start with the strategy, we derive the process architecture, then how do we use it? Because it's not a matter of just making a new poster to put on the wall up next to the strategy. That doesn't help. We're not looking for more wallpaper, we're looking for active and useful management tools. So that's what we'll talk about in enabling. And then the second one we'll do is about the process architecture, and that's fundamental. That's the prerequisite, the touchstone artifact for everything. And that doesn't have to take as long as some people seem to. I think that's it's a handful of weeks. It's not a handful of months or the years that some people seem to take. I think there's some reasonably straightforward ways of doing that. And we can get there pretty quickly, get it to be good enough, and then start using it. And using it, of course, is all about knowing what the processes are, particularly the selected ones, the HIPs, the high impact processes. How should they be working? How are they working? Whose job is it to look across the organization to see all that? How do we make decisions about how to change cross-functional processes? How do we get on with that whole governance? And how do we do what the whole thing is about, of course, is to change processes and to improve organizational performance. So I think of that as active process management. It's a sort of combination of measurement and governance that leads to change, for which we need the right mindset, the right culture, all the right tools and capabilities, and lots of support to have this working as an integrated system of process-based management. So that's what we're going to be doing over the next few sessions. I'm looking forward to it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Roger, for joining and giving us a brief about the next episodes of this series. To all the participants, please write to us if you would like to discuss anything from Prashant, from Roger with us. We will be more than happy to share the thoughts, to provide the information, discuss with you. You will get the recording of this website. You'll get an email also from our office with a link to download the webinar recording. So we look forward. Let us know about your feedback. At the end of the session, it will pop up for a poll, for a feedback. I would request if you can give your feedback to us. It will be easier for us, useful for us to plan our next webinars more in aligned to the expectations. Thank you so much for everyone. Wish you stay safe. Great day. Thank you so much, Prashant, for your time. Thank you, Roger. Wish you a great day ahead.
My pleasure, and thank you everyone again for attending this webinar. I hope it was useful, and let's stay in touch. As Amit said, please write in, and we make sure every question of yours is responded to. That's a promise.
Thank
Take
you.
care. All the best.
Thank you.